Hi, this is Elder Vicki Baker with another booklet and another reading written by Apostle Shane Vaughn. You can find all his work at www.hiscomingkingdom.com. This booklet is entitled When Time Tells Truth. Calendars are theological in nature, not chronological. Why the wrong new year places you in the wrong cycle. Shall we begin? January 1st is not a date. It's a decision. At the stroke of midnight on December 31st, billions of people around the world will celebrate what they believe to be a new beginning. Fireworks will explode. Champagne will flow. Resolutions will be made. And almost no one will stop to ask the most important question: who decided this was the beginning? January 1st is not a date. It is a declaration. It announces what culture believes about beginnings, authority, and renewal. It was a theological statement dressed up as a calendar square. Think about what a beginning actually does. A beginning determines direction. Direction determines destination. You cannot choose a beginning casually and expect a righteous outcome. The starting point of any journey determines the path and ultimately the arrival. When Yahweh wanted to remake Israel's identity, he didn't just change their location, he changed their calendar. This month shall be the beginning of months for you. We find this in Exodus chapter 12, verse 2. He reset their sense of time itself because he understood something that people never consider. Whoever controls the beginning controls the story. Most people will call January 1st harmless. Most will call it tradition. Most will never ask who authored it or what theology it carries. But every beginning is theological. Every beginning preaches a sermon. The question is not whether you will start a new cycle. The question is, whose cycle will you enter? Time is never neutral. There has never been a neutral calendar in human history. Not one. Every civilization that has ever existed has organized time according to its beliefs about origins, authority, and sacred order. Calendars are not innocent grids. They are catechisms. Consider what a calendar actually does. It tells a story about what matters. It dictates what is celebrated and what is ignored. It determines what is remembered and what is forgotten. A calendar shapes that rhythm of life, and rhythm shapes identity. You become what you repeatedly do, and your calendar tells you what to repeatedly do. This is why every empire, every religion, every revolution has eventually gotten around to redesigning the calendar. The French Revolution created a new calendar. The Soviet Union tried to eliminate the 7-day work week, the 7-day week. Communist China renumbered years from the founding of the People's Republic. These weren't bureaucratic adjustments, they were theological assertions. Each one said, history begins with us. Rome understood this. When Augustus Caesar reformed the calendar, he wasn't just fixing astronomical drift. He was embedding Roman theology into the structure of time itself. He renamed months after emperors. He recognized the year around Roman festivals. He made sure that every time a citizen said the name of a month, they were confessing Roman supremacy. If time were truly neutral, no one would bother to control it. Yet every power that has ever sought dominion has reached for the calendar. That should tell you something. Time is a battleground, and calendars are weapons. Silent, persistent, shaping minds without anyone noticing. The calendar you keep is keeping you. 2 circles. Choose one. Here is the vision you must see before anything else in this booklet will make sense. There are 2 circles, and every human being lives inside one of them. Picture it. 2 great wheels turning through time. 2 cycles that govern how people experience the year. 2 rhythms that shape identity, expectation, and destiny. You cannot stand outside both circles. You cannot hover between them. You are always inside one or the other. The first cycle is Rome's circle. It begins in January with Janus, the two-faced god of ambiguity. It moves through months named after war gods and fertility goddesses and emperors who stamped their names on time. It has no redemption at its foundation, only power, desire, and control. This circle produces citizens of empire, workers, consumers, people who measure life by productivity and acquisition. The second circle is Yahweh's circle. It begins in Abib with Passover, blood on the doorsteps, death passing over, slaves walking free. It moves through appointed times that rehearse redemption, revelation, and restoration. This circle produces covenant people. Those who remember what Yahweh has done, who align with his rhythm, who measure life by faithfulness and obedience. These 2 circles are not parallel options of equal value. They lead to different destinations. Roman circle leads to exhaustion, confusion, and collapse. The very symptoms we see everywhere in modern culture, Yahweh's circle leads to identity, clarity, and rest. If you start the circle wrong, you will repeat the wrong lesson all year. Enter Rome's cycle of January 1st, and you will spend 12 months being discipled by empire. Enter Yahweh's cycle at Passover, and you will spend 12 months being formed by covenant. The beginning determines the destination. The circle you choose is the life you live. Why this is the issue. Some will say the discussion is peripheral, a nice topic for those who enjoy calendar trivia, an interesting historical footnote, but nothing that affects real life or real faith. They are wrong. This is not a side discussion. This is not a preference. This is not a hobby for Hebrew roots enthusiasts. Timing is the skeleton structure on which obedience hangs. Get the skeleton wrong, and the whole body is deformed. Consider the chain. Timing governs obedience. Obedience governs blessings. Blessings governs stability. If timing is off, obedience becomes guesswork. If obedience becomes guesswork, blessings become random. If blessings become random, stability collapses. You cannot build a life, or a family, or a congregation, or a nation on randomness. This is why Scripture is so precise about appointed times. Yahweh does not say, celebrate Passover whenever it's convenient. He specifies the month, the day, the manner. He does not say rest whenever you feel like it. He commands a specific day in a specific rhythm. The precision is not legalism. It is architecture. You cannot build a house by placing bricks approximately where they should go. When timing collapses, identity follows. When identity collapses, morality dissolves. Look at any culture in moral freefall and you will find calendar confusion at the root. They no longer know what to celebrate. They no longer know what to remember. They no longer know who they are because they no longer know when they are. Confusion about time always precedes confusion about truth. The calendar is not downstream from theology. It is upstream. Fix the calendar and many other things begin to heal. Ignore the calendar and you will spend your life treating symptoms while the disease flourishes at the root. Rome's calendar preached the gospel. Every calendar preaches. The only question is, what gospel does it proclaim? The Roman calendar that we have inherited with modifications originally began in March. March was named after Mars, the god of war. This was not an accident. Rome was a martial civilization. Conquest was its purpose. Expansion was its destiny. And so the Roman year began with the month dedicated to the God who blessed Roman spears with victory. Following March came April. The origin of April is debated, but the strongest ancient connection links to the Aphrodite, Greek, or Venus, Roman, the goddess of desire, fertility, and sensual pleasure. April was the month of opening, the earth opening, flowers opening, and by extensioning the open of desire itself. Spring awakened not just the fields, but the appetites. May was dedicated to Maia, the goddess of growth and increase. After war and desire came expansion. More territory, more wealth, more power. The empire must always grow. June honored Juno, the goddess of marriage, family, and legitimate social order. After conquest, desire, and growth came the stabilization of what had been gained. Juno blessed the household and made the empire's gains permanent through legitimate succession. Do you see the theology? Power first, desire second, increase third, order fourth. This is Rome's gospel. Establish dominion through force, indulge appetite, expand holdings, and then sanctify it all with respectable social structure. Rome's calendar preached, history begins with us. Order flows from power. Every time a Roman citizen marked the month, they were confessing this creed. And when Rome conquered nations, it exported not just its laws and roads, but its calendar, including to us. The silent insertion of January. January was not part of the original Roman year. This is a fact that most people never learn, but it changes everything about how we should understand our current calendar. In the earliest Roman calendar, the year had only 10 months. It began in March and ended in December. December means 10th month, and it was. The winter months were simply not counted. They were a nameless void, a dead season, outside the calendar entirely. Later, 2 months were added to fill this gap, January and February. They were inserted at the front of the year, pushing all the other months backwards. This is why September, from Septem 7, is now the 9th month. And October, from Octo, meaning 8, is the 10th. November, from Noven, 9, is the 11th. And December, from Decem, 10, is the 12th. The names still confess the original numbering, even though the positions have shifted. January was named after Janus, the two-faced god who looked simultaneously backward and forward. He was the god of doorways, transitions, and beginnings. He presided over the liminal space between what was and what will be. Notice what is absent. January marks no creation. It commemorates no redemption. It celebrates no deliverance. It is purely administrative, a bureaucratic solution to fill a calendar gap sanctified by a pagan deity and ambiguity. The year now begins with the God who looks both ways and commits to neither. Is it any wonder that January resolutions dissolve so quickly? The month itself is dedicated to transition, not transformation. It is the month of the threshold, and thresholds are for passing through, not dwelling in. The year begins with ambiguity, not meaning. The calendar still confesses. Here is something remarkable. Our calendar still tells the truth about its own history. If you know how to, listen. The names of the months confess that they used to be, even though their positions have changed. September means 7th month, but it is the 9th month. Why? Because before January and February were inserted, September was the 7th month. October means 8th month, octo, like octopus, 8 arms, and octagon, 8 sides, but October is the 10th month now. The name contradicts the position. November means 9th month, noven, 9, yet it sits in the 11th position. December means 10th month, decem, like decimal or decade, but December is the 12th month. The calendar is quietly telling on itself. Every time you say October, you are unwittingly confessing that the calendar has been tampered with. The names remember what the positions have forgotten. And what about July and August? These months were originally called Quintilis 5th and Sextilis 6th, but Julius Caesar renamed Quintilis after himself, July, and Augustus Caesar renamed Sextilis after himself, August. Power stamped its name on time. This is not trivia. This is evidence. The calendar we use is not a neutral measurement of astronomical cycles. It is a document of imperial revision. It has been cut, rearranged, and branded by human ambition. If the calendar itself confesses tampering, should we not ask what else has been altered? And more importantly, is there an original design we should return to? Yahweh begins with redemption. When Yahweh constituted Israel as a nation, he did something that no other God had ever done. He gave them a calendar anchored in redemption. Let's look at Exodus chapter 12, verse 2. This month shall be the beginning of months for you. It shall be the first month of the year for you. This was not a suggestion. This was a constitutional decree. Yahweh was telling Israel, you will count time differently than the nations. Your year will not begin with the winter solstice or the spring equinox or the anniversary of some emperor's birth. Your year begins with the night I delivered you. The month of Abib, later called Nisan, was the month of the Exodus. The first month of the biblical year is not marked by astronomical convenience or administrative efficiency. It is marked by blood on doorsteps, death passing over, and slaves walking out of bondage. This changes everything about how the year unfolds. If the year begins with deliverance, then everything that follows is colored by deliverance. The first crops are offered in thanksgiving to the deliverer. The summer feast remember the wilderness journey. The fall feast anticipate final ingathering. Every season points back to Passover and forward to completion. Yahweh anchors time to what he did, not what man hopes to do. The Roman year begins with resolutions, human intentions. The biblical year begins with redemption, divine action. One says, I will try harder this year. The other says, remember what Yahweh has done? The difference between these two beginnings produces two entirely different kinds of people. Two beginnings, two stories, two destinations. Let's trace the two circles from beginning to end. Watch where each one leads. Let's start with Rome's circle. The year begins with Janus, ambiguity, transition, looking both ways but committing to neither. Then comes February, named for purification rituals that cleanse by ceremony, not blood. Then March, Mars, god of war, power asserts itself. Then April, Aphrodite, Venus, the awakening of desire. May, Maii, the goddess of increase. More. Then June, Juno, goddess of marriage and social order, legitimizing what power has seized. So the pattern: ambiguity, ritual, power, desire, increase, control. This is the shape of empire. Uncertain beginnings stabilized by force, fed by appetite, expanded by greed, and sanctified by social structure. The Roman circle forms Roman people. Citizens who serve the state, workers who fuel the economy, consumers who keep the machine running. Yahweh's circle, let's look at this one. The year begins with Passover. Blood, deliverance, exodus from bondage, not ambiguity, but rescue. Not ritual, but redemption. Then comes the counting of the Omer, 50 days of intentional progression towards Sinai. Then Shavuot, which is Pentecost, the giving of Torah, the revelation of Yahweh's instruction. Then the summer months of ordinary faithfulness, walking out of what was received. Then trumpets, awakening, warning, calling to attention. Then Yom Kippur, atonement, cleaning, the covering of sin. Then tabernacles, dwelling with Yahweh, in joy, celebrating, completed harvest. So what's this pattern? It's redemption, progression, revelation, faithfulness, awakening, cleansing, and celebration. This is the shape of covenant. Rescued by grace, instructed in righteousness, sustained through ordinary seasons, called to repentance, cleansed by blood, and gathered for joy. Yahweh's circle forms covenant people. Those who remember deliverance walk in Torah and rest in their King. It's two circles with two destinations. Memory is the battlefield. Why do calendars matter so much? Because memory is the battleground of identity, and calendars are the weapons of memory. What you remember shapes who you are. This is true for individuals and for nations. A person with amnesia does not know who they are because they cannot remember their past. A nation that forgets its founding story loses its sense of purpose and eventually its cohesion. Calendars determine what we remember by determining what we repeat. The feasts of Yahweh are not merely commemorations. They are rehearsals. Every year, Israel was commanded to rehearse the Exodus, not just tell the story, enact it. Eat the bitter herbs, remove the leaven, mark the doorpost, experience the night of deliverance again. Why rehearsal? Because what you repeat, you remember. What you remember, you become. Rehearse delivers every year, and you become a people who expect deliverance. Rehearse provision every harvest, and you become a people who trust the provider. Rehearse atonement every fall, and you become a people who understand the cost of sin and the grace of covering. Contrast this with modern holidays. What do they rehearse? New Year's Day rehearses fresh starts without repentance. Valentine's Day rehearses romantic desire without covenant. Halloween rehearses death as entertainment. These are not neutral celebrations. These are catechesis. They are training exercises for the soul. Feasts are rehearsals. Holidays are distractions. Rehearsal preserves memory. Distractions erases it. And whoever controls memory controls identity. So you see the two circles. Close your eyes and picture this. It is the image that will stay with you long after you finish this booklet. You are standing at the crossroads. Before you are two great circles, two wheels turning through time. The first circle, Rome's wheel. That's a picture, a flat wheel lying horizontal, grinding endlessly in the same groove. Around its rim, read the months. January, Janus. February, purification without blood. March, Mars, war. April, desire. May, increase. June, control. Then the numbered months. Then July and August, emperors who branded time with their names. December ends and the wheel grinds back to January. No ascent, no destination, just repetition. This wheel is crowded. Billions walk its groove. They enter at January, first with resolutions and optimism. By February, the optimism fades. By March, they've forgotten their resolutions. By December, they're exhausted, waiting for another reset that never truly resets anything. The second circle, Yahweh's spiral. Now picture a spiral rising upward, like a staircase winding toward heaven. Its beginning is marked with blood, the blood of Passover. Each revolution passes through the same seasons: redemption, revolution, faithfulness, awakening, atonement, and celebration. But each revolution is higher than the last. The Passover you observe this year is deeper than the Passover you observed 5 years ago. The Sabbath rest you entered this week carries more weight than when you began. The spiral is less crowded. A remnant walks here. They enter at Passover, remembering deliverance. They count the Omer toward Pentecost. They walk the summer in faithfulness. They respond to the trumpets. They afflict their souls on atonement. They rejoice at tabernacles. And when the year ends, they have ascended, not just repeated. Two circles, two shapes, two destinations. One is flat and goes nowhere. One rises and leads home. Which circle do you see yourself standing in right now? Your calendar disciples you. Here is a truth that people consider. You do not use your calendar uses you. A calendar is not a passive tool. It is an active discipler. It tells you when to work and when to rest. It tells you what to celebrate and what to ignore. It tells you where to spend your money, Christmas, birthdays, anniversaries, and where to spend your attention, Super Bowl Sunday, election night, New Year's Eve. Your calendar determines your rhythms, and your rhythms shape souls. The weekly rhythm of work and rest either aligns with Sabbath or it doesn't. The yearly rhythm of celebration either aligns with Yahweh's feast or with the world's holidays. Over time, these rhythms carve grooves in your soul. You become what you repeatedly do. Consider how much of your life is already determined by the calendar you follow. Your children go to school according to it. Your vacation is planned around it. Your taxes are due because of it. Your sense of holiday is defined by it. You cannot escape the calendar. You can only choose which calendar will shape you. The question is not whether you will be discipled by a calendar. You will be. The question is which calendar will do the discipling. Rome's calendar disciples you into empire rhythms. Work, consume, indulge, repeat. The world's year is designed to maximize productivity and consumption. Even its rest, vacations, holidays, is instructed around spending. Yahweh's calendar disciples you into covenant rhythms. Remember, obey, rest, celebrate. The biblical year is desired to form a peculiar people who operate on a different schedule than the nations around them. You don't own your calendar. It owns you. It's just semantics. One of the most common dismissals of this teaching is the claim that it's just semantics. What difference does it make what we call the months? What difference does it make when we start the year? These are just words and dates, nothing more. This objection sounds reasonable until you examine it. Semantics, the meaning of words, shapes everything. Change the meaning of a word and you change how people think. Change how people think and you change how they behave. Change how they behave and you change culture itself. Consider marriage. For millennia, the word marriage meant a covenant between a man and a woman. Then the semantics changed. The word was redefined, and with the redefinition came legal changes, social changes, educational changes, and eventually religious changes. Was that just semantics? Consider gender. The millennia, gender referred to biological reality. Then the semantics changed. New words were invented. Old words were redefined. And now children are being chemically and surgically altered based on these semantic shifts. Was that just semantics? The same principle applies to time. When you rename months after emperors, you are teaching people to honor emperors. When you begin the year with the two-faced God, you are teaching people that ambiguity is the foundation of time. When you detach the calendar from redemption and attach it to empire, you are discipling an entire civilization to think in imperial categories. Semantics define categories. Categories define behavior. Behavior defines culture. Nothing that shapes behavior is just words. The people who tell you that words don't matter are usually the same people working hardest to control which words you're allowed to use. How about this is legalism? Another common objection. This calendar talk is legalism. We're under grace, not law. We don't have to follow Jewish calendars. Paul said not to let anyone judge you regarding festivals and new moons. This objection confuses two very different things: legalism and alignment. With legalism is the attempt to earn righteousness through rule keeping. It says, if I follow the right calendar perfectly, Yahweh will accept me. This is false and dangerous. No one is justified by calendar observance. Salvation comes through faith in Yeshua, not through knowing the date of Passover. Alignment is something different entirely. Alignment is the ordering of life according to Yahweh's design so that obedience can function properly. It does not earn righteousness. It expresses righteousness. A righteous person wants to align with Yahweh's patterns because they love Yahweh, not because they're trying to earn his love. Consider an analogy. A musician does not earn their musical identity by practicing scales, but a musician who refuses to learn scales will never play well. The scales don't make you a musician, but alignment with musical structure allows your musicianship to function. In the same way, calendar alignment doesn't make you righteous, but it provides the structure within which righteousness operates. Yahweh never commanded remembrance to control people. He commanded remembrance because forgetting destroys them. Israel was not given the feast as a burden. They were given as anchors. Without the feast, Israel would have drifted into the same calendar of the nations and eventually became indistinguishable from them. The feasts are not chains. No, not chains at all. They are tethers to truth. Then it doesn't affect salvation. Fine. Some will say maybe calendars matter for identity or culture, but they don't affect salvation. I'm saved by grace through faith. The calendar I follow doesn't change my eternal destiny. This is true, and it misses the point entirely. Israel was saved in Egypt. The blood of the Lamb was applied. The death angel passed over. They walked out of bondage. By any measure, they were redeemed people. But their walk in the wilderness, their growth, their maturity, their ability to take the promised land depended entirely on timing, obedience, and remembrance. An entire generation died in the wilderness, not because they weren't saved, but because they couldn't align with Yahweh's timing. They arrived at Kadesh Barnea at the right time and refused to enter. Timing mattered. Salvation is the entry point. It is the door, but no one lives in a doorway. Salvation gets you into the house, but alignment determines how you live within it. Consider, you can be a saved person who is miserable, defeated, confused, and unfruitful. Salvation guarantees eternal destiny. It does not guarantee present victory. Present victory requires alignment, knowing the season, understanding the times, and walking in sync with Yahweh's rhythm. Salvation is entry. Alignment is direction. A person who is saved but misaligned will spend their life wandering in a wilderness of confusion, wondering why blessings seem sporadic and breakthroughs seem rare. Alignment doesn't add to salvation. It activates the fullness of what salvation provides. Paul and the days. But Paul said not to judge people about holy days. This is the verse that gets thrown at anyone who teaches calendar consciousness. Let's actually examine what Paul said and what he did not say. Let's go to Colossians 2, verse 16 and 17, where Paul writes, "Therefore, let no one pass judgment on you in questions of food and drink, or with regard to a festival or a new moon or a Sabbath. These are a shadow of the things to come, but the substance belongs to Messiah." Notice carefully what Paul is saying. He is telling the Colossians not to let anyone judge them for observing these things. The context is Gentile believers who were being told they couldn't participate in the biblical feast because they weren't really part of Israel. Paul is defending their right to observe. Read it again. Let no one pass judgment on you with regard to a festival. If the Colossians weren't observing festivals, why would anyone be judging them? You don't get judged for not doing something. They were being judged for doing it, and Paul told them to ignore the critics. Furthermore, Paul never opposed Yahweh's appointed times. What Paul opposed was pagan bondage, the elemental spirits, the days, months, seasons, years of Galatians chapter 4, verse 10 that referred to pagan observances, not Yahweh's calendar. Paul himself kept the feast. He rushed to Jerusalem to arrive in time for Pentecost. That's Acts chapter 20, verse 16. He referenced Passover imagery through his letters. He assumed his audience knew the feast calendar. Paul opposed idolatry. He never opposed Yahweh's rhythm. Context matters, and those who rip verses out of context to dismiss the biblical calendar are mishandling the very scriptures they claim to honor. Well, this divides people. Some will object. Teaching this just divides people. It creates an us versus them mentality. It makes people feel superior for knowing something others don't. We should focus on what unites us, not what divides. This objection sounds charitable, but it misunderstands the nature of truth. Truth always divides before it unites. Light divides from darkness. That's what light does. Creation itself began with division. Light from darkness. Waters from above and from waters below. Day from night. Division is not the enemy. Confusion is. A surgeon's knife divides tissue to bring healing. Refusing to cut because cutting divides is not compassion. It's malpractice. Some things must be separated before wholeness can emerge. The biblical calendar divides in exactly this way. It separates Yahweh's appointed times from the world's holidays. It separates covenant rhythm from culture rhythm. It separates those who remember from those who have forgotten. This is not division for its own sake. It is division for the sake of clarity. And clarity is the precondition for unity. You cannot unite around fog. You can only unite around something sharp enough to see. Will this teaching make some people uncomfortable? Yes. Will it expose the unexamined assumptions that most believers have absorbed from their culture? Yes, again. Will it require people to rethink things they've taken for granted all their lives? Absolutely. Alignment divides from drift. Order divides from chaos. But truth worth knowing is truth worth the disruption. And anyone who tells you that we should avoid disruption at all costs has forgotten that the gospel itself is the most disruptive message ever proclaimed. End of cycle symptoms. Look around at modern culture and tell me what you see. Identity crisis. People no longer know who they are. Moral inversion. What was once called evil is now celebrated as good. Time acceleration. The sense that everything is speeding up, spinning out of control. Lawlessness. The collapse of boundaries, the erasure of distinctions. These are not random social problems. They are end-of-cycle symptoms. Every cycle has a beginning, a middle, and an end. The beginning establishes trajectory. The middle develops momentum. The end reveals consequences. If the trajectory was wrong from the beginning, the consequences at the end will be catastrophic. Western civilization has been running on Rome's calendar for centuries. It began with Rome's theology, power, desire, increase, order. It developed Rome's patterns, conquest, consumption, expansion, control. And now it is reaping Rome's harvest, confusion, exhaustion, and collapse. When timing is off at the civilization level, discernment fails across the board. People cannot read the signs of the times because they don't know what time it is. They cannot distinguish seasons because the calendar has erased seasonal meaning. They cannot align with Yahweh's rhythm because they have never learned it. This is not pessimism. This is diagnosis. A doctor who identifies cancer is not being negative. The doctor is telling the truth so that treatment can begin. The treatment begins with recalibrating time. Return to the right beginning. Re-enter the right cycle. Realign with the rhythm that Yahweh established from the beginning. This will not fix everything overnight, but it will put you on a different trajectory, one that leads somewhere other than collapse. When timing is off. What happens when individual timing is off? The consequences are everywhere once you know what to look for. Wrong seasons produce wrong expectations. People plant in winter and wonder why nothing grows. They try to harvest in spring and find nothing ready. They rest when they should work and work when they should rest. Their efforts are sincere, but their timing is wrong, and wrong timing negates right effort. People harvest too early. Impatience drives them to grab the fruit before it's ripe. The result is bitterness, literally and spiritually. Vineyards that are harvested too soon produce sour wine. Lives that rush the harvest produce sour outcomes. People rest too late. They push past the Sabbath principle, thinking that more effort will produce more results. But Yahweh's designed rest as part of productivity, not its opposite. Skip the rest and the work suffers. Burnout is a timing problem disguised as a workload problem. People celebrate nothing. When the calendar has no feast, or only hollow feast, celebration dies. And when celebration dies, joy dies with it. The feasts were not arbitrary. They were prescriptions for joy. Remember them, and depression becomes the baseline. People mourn constantly. Without proper seasons of joy, sorrow fills every vacancy. Without designated time for grief, grief bleeds into everything. The human soul needs rhythm, time to weep and times to laugh, times to mourn and times to dance. Flatten the rhythm, and the soul becomes either numb or overwhelmed. Discernment collapses when timing collapses. You cannot make wise decisions if you don't know what season you're in. The right action at the wrong time is the wrong action. Cycles decide outcomes. Here is a principle that governs all of life. You always end where your cycle leads. You cannot enter a cycle and expect to arrive somewhere other than where that cycle goes. The circle has a logic of its own, and it doesn't care about your intentions. In Rome's circle, you will experience these outcomes. January, optimism that fades by February. The cycle begins with no foundation, so momentum cannot be sustained. Endless productivity without rest. The circle has no true Sabbath, so you work until you break. Consumption that never satisfies. The cycle is built on increase, so enough is never enough. Identity confusion. The circle has no redemption narrative, so you never know who you really are. Exhaustion disguised as success. The circle measures worth by output, so you burn out chasing metrics. This is not theory. Look at the people around you who are fully immersed in Rome's calendar. Stressed, tired, anxious, medicated. Chasing goals that keep moving. They are living proof of where that circle leads. In Yahweh's circle, you will experience different outcomes. Identity rooted in redemption. The year begins with deliverance, so you know who you are, the redeemed. Rhythm of work and rest. The Sabbath structures the week, so productivity includes recovery. Gratitude as a default posture. The feast rehearsed provision, so thankfulness becomes habitual. Memory that anchors. The appointed times repeat the story, so you never drift into forgetfulness. Joy as the destination. The year ends with tabernacles. Celebrations, not exhaustion. Cycle, decide outcomes. Appointed times. In Hebrew, the word for the biblical feast is moedim, appointed times. This word reveals something crucial about how Yahweh thinks about time. An appointment is not a suggestion. When you have an appointment with a doctor, you don't show up whenever you feel like it. When you have an appointment with a judge, you don't reschedule for your convenience. An appointment is a fixed point in time that demands your presence. Yahweh's calendar is built on appointments. Passover is not whenever you get around to remembering the Exodus. It is the 14th of Abib. Pentecost is not whenever you feel like celebrating first fruits. It is 50 days after Passover. Tabernacles is not whenever harvest feels complete. It is the 15th of the 7th month. These are appointments with the King of the universe. You show up or you don't. Modern Christianity has largely abandoned the concept of appointed times. The church calendar substitutes different appointments, Christmas, Easter, Pentecost, and Sunday, that do not align with the biblical moedim. And increasingly, even these substitutes are being abandoned in favor of no rhythm at all. Just attend church whenever it's convenient. This casualness would be unthinkable in any other appointment context. No one says, I'll meet with my employer whenever I feel like it. No one says, I'll appear in the court when my schedule permits. Yet somehow, Yahweh's appointments are treated as optional. You don't reschedule appointments with the Creator. You align your life around His calendar, not the other way around. This is not legalism. This is the basic respect that any appointment deserves, especially an appointment with Yahweh. Rhythm produces holiness. Holiness is not just a moral category. It is a rhythmic category. Set apart, has cadence. It beats to a different drum than the world around it. Consider music. A melody is not just the right notes. It is the right notes in the right rhythm. Play the correct notes with wrong timing and you have cacophony, not music. The rhythm is as essential as the pitch. Holiness works the same way. It is not just doing the right things. It is doing the right things at the right times in the right pattern. Sabbath rest is holy, not just because rest is good, but because it occurs in a set-apart rhythm. Feast celebrations is holy, not just because joy is good, but because it occurs at appointed times. Break the rhythm and the song collapses. A Sabbath that moves around the week based on convenience is no longer a Sabbath. It's just a day off. A feast that floats to whenever you feel celebratory is no longer a feast. It's just a party. The set-apartness is inseparable from the timing. This is why Yahweh was so precise about the calendar. He wasn't being arbitrary. He was composing a symphony. The weekly Sabbath is the baseline. The monthly new moons are the rhythm section. The annual feast are the melodic movements. Together, they create a holy music that shapes the people who live within it. This is not control. This is design. A life lived according to Yahweh's rhythm has a different sound than a life lived according to the world's rhythm. The difference is holiness, not as moral superiority, but as musical distinctiveness. The shape of the two circles. Not only do the two circles have different content, they have different shapes. Understanding this difference changes everything. Rome's circle is flat. It turns endlessly on a horizontal plane. January leads to December, leads to January, leads to December, year after year. The wheel spins in the same groove. There is motion, but no ascent. There is repetition, but no progression. This is why New Year's resolutions fail so predictably. The cycle itself has no upward force. You are trying to climb while walking on a treadmill. The wheel brings you back to the same place you started, and you wonder why nothing has changed. The pagan worldview that underlines Rome's calendars is cyclical fatalism. The gods themselves are trapped in the wheel. Seasons turn, empires rise and fall. Nothing ultimately progresses toward a goal. There is no eschaton, no consumption, no end toward which all things move. Just repetition. Yahweh's circle is a spiral. It turns on a vertical axis. Each revolution brings you back to the same season, but higher than before. Passover this year should mean more to you than Passover 5 years ago. The Sabbath you observe this week should carry deeper rest than the Sabbath you observed when you first began. The spiral ascends toward a destination. Yahweh's calendar is moving somewhere, toward the day of Yahweh, toward the final ingathering, toward the marriage supper of the Lamb. History is not a meaningless wheel. It is a story with a climax. Same season, deeper obedience. Same feast, fuller revelation. Enter Rome's flat circle and you will repeat endlessly the same frustrations, the same failures, the same exhaustion year after year. Enter Yahweh's ascending spiral and you will grow. Each cycle building on the last, each adding to the one before, moving upward toward completion. The shape of the circle determines the shape of your life. The lie of any time works. Perhaps the most dangerous lie about time is the idea that timing doesn't really matter. Any time works. It's the thought that counts. The heart is what matters, not the date. If this were true, prophecy would not exist. Think about it. The entire prophetic enterprise is built on the premise that timing matters intensely. Yahweh announces events before they happen, and he specifies when they will happen. Daniel's 70 weeks, the 400 years of Egyptian bondage, the 70 years of Babylonian captivity. These are not approximations. They were precise temporal predictions. Why would Yahweh be so precise about timing and prophecy if timing were ultimately irrelevant? The precision demonstrates that time itself is meaningful, that when something happens, it is significant as that it happens. Consider the Messiah. Yeshua came in the fullness of time. You could find that in Galatians chapter 4, verse 4. Not early, not late, at exactly the right moment in history, when the Roman roads made travel possible, when Greek was the common language, when the Pax Romana allowed movement across borders. The timing was not incidental, it was essential. And Yeshua died at Passover, not accidentally, not approximately, exactly at Passover, as the lambs were being slaughtered in the temple. The timing was the message. The timing was the theology. Timing matters because truth unfolds on purpose. Yahweh is not sloppy with time. He is precise because precision means something. And if Yahweh treats timing as significant, so should we. Each year you will choose a circle. This is not abstract theology. This is immediate and practical. January 1st, you will step into a circle. You may step consciously or unconsciously, but you will step. Tomorrow the world steps into Rome's circle. Fireworks will proclaim the gospel of empire. Champagne will be raised to a god of ambiguity. Resolutions will be made. Promises to self rather than responses to Yahweh. And billions of souls will enter another year of Rome's cycle, expecting somehow to arrive at a different destination than where that cycle has always led. You don't have to step into that circle. You can recognize January 1st as a civil convenience without investing it with spiritual significance. You can mark the day on your work calendar without entering it as your beginning. You can wait for Abib, for Passover, for the new year that Yahweh established. You can step into a different circle. The question is not whether you will enter a cycle. You will. The question is which cycle will carry you through this year, and where will it deposit you at the end? This is not about perfection. Some who hear the teaching will feel overwhelmed. I've been following the wrong calendar my entire life. I don't know the biblical feast dates. I don't know how to observe them. It feels impossible to change. Take a breath. This is not about perfection. This is about alignment. And alignment begins with awareness. You cannot align with something you don't know exists. The first step is simply seeing, recognizing that there is a biblical calendar that differs from the civil calendar, and that the difference matters. This seeing is itself a form of repentance. You are turning from ignorance toward knowledge. The second step is starting where you are. You don't have to master the entire biblical calendar overnight. Learn Passover this year. Observe it. Let it teach you. Then learn the next feast. Grow incrementally. Yahweh is not demanding perfection. He is inviting progression. The third step is adjusting forward. Don't waste energy on guilt over what you didn't know. What matters is what you do with what you now know. Every day is an opportunity to align more fully. Every week is a chance to practice Sabbath more faithfully. Every year brings another cycle of feast to observe. Start where you are, adjust forward, learn to count again. This is not a burden, it is a gift. Yahweh is offering you a different rhythm, a different story, a different destination. You don't have to achieve it all at once. You just have to start walking in the right direction. Grace covers the learning process. What grace does not cover is willful refusal after you've been shown the truth. How about order without pride? There is temptation that accompanies calendar consciousness. It is the temptation to become proud, to look down on those who don't know what you now know, to feel spiritually superior because you deserve the Modeum while others observe Christmas. This temptation must be resisted fiercely. Knowledge of the biblical calendar does not make you more righteous. It gives you an opportunity to become more aligned. But alignment itself is not righteousness. Righteousness is faithfulness, love, justice, mercy, not calendar knowledge. Teach without arrogance. When you share this understanding with others, share it as a gift you received, not a trophy you earned. You didn't figure this out on your own. Someone taught you, or you encountered resources that opened your eyes. Pass on the gift the way it was given to you, freely, humbly, without condensation. Model without coercion. The best way to teach the calendar is to live it joyfully. Let people see the fruit of Sabbath rest in your life. Let them taste the richness of Passover celebration in your home. Let them observe the peace that comes from living in Yahweh's rhythm. Modeling is more persuasive than arguing. Invite without pressure. Invite people to your Seder. Invite them to observe a Sabbath with you. Give them a taste of what the calendar produces, but don't pressure. Don't manipulate. Don't make them feel guilty. Truth persuades. It does not bully. The goal is not to win arguments about calendars. The goal is to help people discover the rhythm that Yahweh designed for human flourishing. The goal is undermined if your delivery is laced with pride. Teaching your house. Before you can change the culture, you must change your household. Before your congregation can realign, your family must realign. Discipleship begins at the table. Meals. In ancient Israel, the calendar was transmitted through meals. Passover was a meal. Shabbat was anchored by meals. The feast centered on eating together. If you want to teach your household the biblical calendar, start by eating differently. Shabbat dinner every Friday evening. Special meals on the feast days. Let the rhythm of your table mark the rhythm of Yahweh's time. Rest. Sabbath is not just a doctrine. It is a practice. And practices are learned in households. Teach your children to rest on the seventh day. Show them what it looks like to stop working, stop striving, stop producing. Let them experience the counterculture gift of cessation. This will mark them more deeply than any lecture. Story. Every feast has a story. Passover tells the story of Exodus. Pentecost tells the story of Revelation at Sinai. Tabernacles tells the story of wilderness provision. Tell these stories to your children. Tell them at the feast meals. Tell them at bedtime. Let the biblical narrative become the story your household lives inside. Memory. The ultimate goal of household calendar teaching is memory formation. You are building memories in your children that will shape them for a lifetime. The smell of Shabbat candles, the taste of matzah, the sound of the shofar. These sensory memories become anchors that hold them to Yahweh's rhythm even when they are far from home. time before nations do. Change the households, and eventually the culture shifts. The power of refusal. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to participate. You do not need anyone's permission to opt out of January 1st celebrations. You do not need consensus forms from your extended family. You do not need approval from your workplace. You simply stop agreeing. This is harder than it sounds. The pressure to conform to the culture calendar is immense. Everyone around you is celebrating. Everyone is making resolutions. Everyone is saying Happy New Year. The weight of social expectation presses constantly. But refusal is a form of witness. When you quietly decline to invest spiritual significance in January 1st, you are making a statement. When you explain, if asked, what your new year begins with, Passover, you are planting a seed. When you model a different rhythm without hostility or superiority, you are demonstrating that another way is possible. You simply stop agreeing. This does not mean being rude. You can politely participate in workplace functions without investing spiritual meaning in them. You can acknowledge the civil calendar's practical function without treating it as a theological significant. The refusal is internal before it is external. A decision about where you place your hope and how you mark your time. The power of refusal grows over years. 1 year of quiet non-participation might go unnoticed. 5 years established a pattern. 10 years creates a legacy. 20 years shapes a family culture that your grandchildren will inherit. Refusal is not passive. It is one of the most active things you can do. A beginning that is actually new. What would a truly new year look like? Not a cosmetic reset, but an actual new beginning anchored to redemption. Okay, redemption first. The year begins with blood. The lamb dies. The firstborn is spared. The slaves walk free. This is not metaphor for Israel. It was reality. And for us, it points to the greater reality. Yahshua, our Passover lamb, slain so that the death passes over us. A new year that begins with redemption begins with gratitude, not resolution. It begins with what was done for us, not what we plan to do. Obedience is second. From Passover to Pentecost, Israel counted the Omer. 50 days of intentional progression toward Sinai, where the Torah would be given. The second movement of the biblical year is instruction. We receive the word. We learn what Yahweh requires. Obedience is the response to redemption, not its precondition. After that, provision follows. The summer months bring harvest. First the barley, then the wheat, then the grapes and figs and olives. Yahweh provides. The year that begins with redemption and continues with obedience produces provision. This is not magic. It is design. Alignment with Yahweh's rhythm positions you to receive what He is already given. Rest crowns it. The fall feasts bring the year to completion. Trumpets sound the alarm. Atonement cleanses the residue. Tabernacles celebrates dwellings with Yahweh in joy. The year ends not with exhaustion, but with rest. The rest of a work completed. A harvest gathered. A people at peace with their king. This is a new year. That is a beginning worth making. 2 circles, 1 choice. You have now seen what most people never see. There are 2 circles, and everyone lives in one of them. Rome's circle has been turning for over 2,000 years. It begins with ambiguity. It moves through power, desire, increase, and control. It produces citizens of empire. Exhausted, confused, always chasing, never arriving. Billions of people walk in the circle without ever questioning it. They were born into it. They were educated by it. They mark their lives by it, and they will die within it, never knowing that another circle even existed. Yahweh's circle has been turning since the Exodus. It begins with redemption. It moves through revelation, faithfulness, repentance, and celebration. It produces covenant people, rooted, peaceful, remembering, rejoicing. A remnant has always walked in the circle, even when surrounded by empire. They count time differently. They celebrate differently. They rest differently. They end differently. The two circles lead to two destinations. Roman circles lead to what you see all around you. Identity, confusion, moral inversion, burnout, collapse. The symptoms of a civilization in end-stage cycle exhaustion. Yahweh's circle leads to what the world cannot produce. Settled identity, clear conviction, sustainable rhythm, genuine rest, the fruit of alignment with the one who designed time itself. Tomorrow, the world steps into Rome's circle again. Fireworks, champagne, resolutions, the whole machinery of empire's new year will grind into motion. And most people will step into that circle without a second thought. You don't have to. You can see the two circles now. You can choose which one you walk in. You can step out of Rome's endless flat wheel and into Yahweh's ascending spiral. Calendars always preach theology. Rome preaches power. Yahweh preaches redemption. Tomorrow, the world will choose empire again. You don't have to. Which circle will you walk in this year? Thank you. Thank you for listening to When Time Tells the Truth, written by Apostle Shane Vaughn, founder of First Harvest Ministries. All of his work can be found at www.hiscomingkingdom.com. Many blessings, I pray, fill your life and your heart, and I pray overflowing joy from Yahweh. Thank you so much.